Hello, my lovelies, and welcome to Where the Road Rises, Law, Lessons, Legacy, with me, your host, Eileen Walsh. We have a warm and wonderful guest to share fascinating stories and insight with us today, Dr. Eileen Couture. Eileen is in her 30th year as an emergency medicine physician. Eileen has dedicated her career to assisting the marginalized and the disenfranchised, working not just with patients in the emergency department at Cook County Hospital, but with inmates in correctional medicine, addiction medicine, and HIV prevention. Eileen has published numerous articles in her discipline and appeared on the TV series Untold Stories of the ER. She is also an educator teaching medical students. She has volunteered her time and served her community on multiple boards throughout her storied career. And we are just delighted to welcome Dr. Eileen Couture to our show today. Welcome, Eileen. Great name. You know, we're going to go from here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you grew up and about your family background?
Sure. So I grew up in Kell Park, which was south side of Chicago. I'm one of 10. I'm number 4 in the line. I have 5 sisters and 4 brothers. Growing up, it was a great environment, but you had to do your jobs. You had to work.
Yes.
You know, my dad was a strong disciplinarian. He had to be at the table by 5. He didn't get enough food.
Yes.
Yeah, so, it all starts from where you grow up, and we all played sports, and we were all competitive, and the rule in the house was when you turned 16, you had to have a job.
Yeah.
Yeah, so off to St. Francis I went.
Okay, and what did you start off studying?
I was actually a nurse's aide, a dietary aide at the hospital in Blue Island, and then decided that I was going to go into nursing. So I attended Moraine Valley for 2 years and then went on to Northern Illinois University and became a nurse.
Okay. And from there?
From there, I worked in the city of Chicago. It was really kind of challenging. And I just said, is this it? Is this where it ends? Is this where I keep growing? And it was kind of interesting because I started to talk to my husband at the time, and he said, I think you need to be a doctor. So he's been very influential in that, and so sure enough, I had 2 kids at the time, and I applied to medical school.
Oh, not afraid of challenges.
No.
So how was that? And you were having your babies while you were studying your boards. How was that? I guess you learned good time management.
Oh, it's good time management. It was, it was really difficult, Eileen. It was very, very difficult. I look back now, and as I teach these students, I'm not really sure how I did that. I became very disciplined. I was disciplined not only with my time, but the kids' time.
Yeah.
Organized.
Mm-hmm.
Organized.
That's it.
Yeah, you got to have, I think the secret to pursuing something like that, similar to law, is the passion has to be there.
Yes, yes. And it's good if you don't know how hard it is when you jump in. So many of the things in life we have achieved, had we known, we might never have taken them on, but you take it on and you bite off more than you can swallow, and then you can swallow it. So let's talk about your first years of practicing medicine. And why emergency medicine?
Well, I think I was in the emergency department as a nurse. And so it was an area of familiarity. I had worked at the University of Chicago when it was a trauma center. And I said, is there anything, what else is there to medicine? Mm-hmm. We have this saying that you can take the person out of the emergency department, but you'll never take the emergency department out of the nurse. So it was an easier transition. And as I began to train, I said, maybe I should do cardiology. Maybe I should do pediatrics. And then, all the time I'd say, no, you're doing emergency medicine. You're gonna go for it. You're gonna go for it. Yeah. So I had an opportunity to do a couple of rotations at Cook County. I went down to that ER, completely overwhelmed by the size and the amount of people. And I decided to do a rotation there as a medical student. And I said, this is where I belong. This is me.
Right,
yeah.
right. And what is it like? What is it like in the ER as a doctor? Is it as we see in the shows, or is it something different? Give us a little taste of what a day looks like in the ER for an emergency medicine doctor.
Sure. It's really completely unpredictable. It's oftentimes you're not sure what's going to happen that day, where your emotions will take you, how much you'll have to. I always say you got to be a warrior. You got to go above the emotion. You have to be the stable person in the room. You have to be the calm voice. You have to be the loud voice. You have to be the advocate. And sometimes, and it's very, very difficult. People are faced with tragedy within 6 minutes. Yes. They get hurt, their loved ones are hurt, their loved ones have passed away, and they have minutes to deal with that. And where are you in that? You're in the equation. You're always in that equation. So you can be quiet, you can, a lot of times you're the leader of that emotion. You're the person you're hugging, they are. Sometimes it's theater. Sometimes it's comical. People have a different expectation, I think, today of healthcare, in that they can fix everything. Medicine can fix everything. And a lot of times we can't. We can't fix things. So sometimes just a single encounter, it would be to inform a patient of the reality of what's about to happen to them. And you're that voice. Mm-hmm. So some people disagree with you, some people get angry, some people walk out, some people, they're just not prepared to deal with that. Mm-hmm. Life is kind of funny in that regard. Mm-hmm. We can't predict what's going to happen to us.
And Eileen, how do you, because you're still a beautiful, empathetic person after all these years in what have been tough, harsh, difficult environments, and we'll talk about your time at the jail also. So how do you keep empathy and still be the stable person in the room, the controlled voice when others are losing their control? How do you maintain the balance between empathy and control, and then not getting completely burnt out if you do have empathy for these very difficult situations families are facing? I think that would be a hard line to walk.
You've got to feed your own spirit. I have to feed my own spirit. And what I mean by that is, whether I go golfing and I'm looking at that fairway, how beautiful it is, or out in the garden for 10 hours, or just sitting, watching some interaction at a park, you've got to feed that spirit. And I think we all have to feed our spirit.
Yeah.
And there's got to be, you've got to believe in God, I think you have to believe in God.
Yeah.
And I draw strength from that.
Right. And you can come away from some of the very difficult things you saw at the ER, come home to your children, and now be a wife and mother, and not carry it with you, but not to be kind of broken down by it. I think that's a real skill, and I can imagine that faith is very much at the heart of it. You transitioned from the Cook County Hospital to the jail. Tell us about that experience.
So I was offered an opportunity to interview for the position at the jail, and my chairman at the time had encouraged me. He said, you really advocate for those people. You seem to care about those people. You should go over and take that position. So I was sitting there, and this had been my third interview, and I'm talking to the medical director, and we're sitting in his office, and I'm asking him, I said, I'm not sure, there's a lot of gates, and there's a lot of doors that slam, and the shackles, and the violence, and he goes, Eileen, look out my window. And in the window, there was a cardinal sitting in that fence, and he said, there's a lot of good things that come out of Cook County Jail, including that bird. And he really tried to say, it's not hopeless here. It really is not hopeless. You should come, you should see it. Just come for 3 months and see what you think about taking care of the people who are really underserved, who need advocates.
Yeah.
And you seem to have that, so.
And how was that experience, and how was it different from being in the emergency room, given such a, pardon the phrase, captive audience, people who didn't have a choice about being there?
The transition was difficult because there's a crime behind every every detainee. There's some type of crime. They're in there because they're being protected, right? We're being protected. Society's being protected from that for some reason. And so what happens in that environment, a lot of times the staff know the crime. And they address that. They say, do you know who that is? Frequently. And so I used to say, it's about no bias here. It's about giving them the care they need, regardless of who they are, right? Mm-hmm. But you're reminded of the seriousness of that crime with the shackles and the number of officers and their outbursts of anger. You're reminded of that. So my line to the detainee, my go-to was, I'm the best advocate you got. I'm not here. I don't really care about your crime. I'm not the judge. I'm not the jury. All I'm trying to do is get you medication. Yes. You either participate in that or you can refuse. And then that seemed to, dissipate some of the mistrust. Yeah. So it was, it was really interesting. Correctional medicine is very interesting.
And probably, Eileen, you also had a lot of knowledge and dealt with addiction medicine, which probably led directly from maybe Cook County Hospital dealing with the poorer patients, as well as the correctional medicine. Mm-hmm. So tell me what role addiction played.
So I had volunteered to be on a board of directors at the South Suburban Council for Alcohol and Drug Abuse. And in that role, I was simply a volunteer. I would attend meetings. I was asked to do that because I was a Cook County physician. The medical director had retired, so I took on that role. In the beginning, I had no appreciation for how severe addiction can be. Mm. But to talk to them and to listen to that story of how they got where they got and their perception of survival, their perspective on how they survive is really amazing. They would say to me, I would encourage them to stay in the program for the 28 days. And they would say, I'm not sure I'm going to be alive by the end of the week. How could I stay in this program for 28 days? And I said, all you have to do is stay here. All you have to do is stay. That's it. You're protected. It's a protective environment, mm-hmm. right? It's an amazing view of how people can survive, how they, go through a system that's so harsh. Yeah. And they live.
Yeah, it reminds me when I was a public defender, a couple of things. As a young public defender going into the Joliet Prison, Stateville, as well as the Will County prisons, and I felt very safe when I had clients in there that I was defending. Mm-hmm. And I look back now and I wonder, was it just youthful delusion? I think back now being in those cells, but at the time I had no fear because I was driven by the sense of what justice I was bringing. And certainly in the public defender's office, coming across addiction time and time again, I had no idea either, Eileen, that addiction was behind so many of the crimes, the prostitution, the batteries, the damage to property that we were dealing with. So these can be great lessons. I wanted to ask you, as you mentioned, and as we discuss addiction, you have reminded me, and I told you this when we became friends, of Dr. Oliver Sacks. And he wrote about his work in the 1960s in New York, and he himself was recovering from addiction. He said, I found meaningful work in a chronic care hospital in the Bronx. I was fascinated by my patients there, cared for them deeply, and felt something of a mission to tell their stories virtually unknown, almost imaginable to the general public. And he also said his colleagues weren't much interested in those marginalized people. So what has your work with the poor and the marginalized and the disenfranchised, what has that taught you about your profession, about yourself, how we're doing as a society, and do we need to do better? That's a loaded question.
I try to share their stories. I try to be empathetic. A lot of times, it's kind of interesting, and I don't know if this answers the question, but if a detainee comes into the emergency department, I always sign up for them. And I tell them, I've been to Stateville. Have you been to Stateville? Are you hungry? Yes. if somebody who's got a long addiction history and they're there because they're in withdrawal, I sign up for those people. Because I always worry, will you get the same care of somebody who's not been down that road, who doesn't understand the complexity of why they're presenting?
Yes.
It's a terrible thing to be shackled to a gurney in the middle of an emergency department with 4 officers around you and nobody's listening.
Yeah.
It's easy to have that bias as a physician. It's very easy.
And fear would probably
Fear as well.
keep you from being as empathetic as you might want to.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because they don't, what happens if you unshackle someone? What happens?
Yep.
Why are they shackled so heavily? Why are they guarded so heavily? That doesn't, for me, it's never been, I have been assaulted, I will say that, by a detainee. And so I keep my distance, but I also ask permission when I'm going to talk to them or touch them. And that's what that taught me,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've worked in HIV prevention, which is probably a part of that world also. Tell us a little bit about that.
That was an interesting story. So I really had a strong chairman down at Cook County Hospital, Dr. Simon, and I was late for one of the faculty meetings. And as I walked in, I was about 10 minutes late because of a snowstorm, and I was delayed on the Dan Ryan. And as I walked in, he took that clipboard and he passed it along on the table, and he said, "You're late, you're getting HIV prevention."
That was your punishment.
Yes.
But no one else wanted.
No one else wanted. It really is, HIV prevention is not really part of emergency medicine, but I took it. And so I initially started my own little study, and what I would do is collect the available tubes in the back of the patient rooms. And what I did is I took those tubes, they were not labeled, and I took them down to the lab, and I asked the lab to do HIV tests on those labels, those unknown blood samples. I collected 73 of them, and 13 were positive.
Gracious.
And it set off fireworks at the CDC. They said, "What did you do?" And I said, I found all this HIV down there. So these people are out there, they didn't know they were HIV positive. And it really started this spiral to say, when people engage in healthcare, should we just offer testing, regardless of why they present? And it just started to snowball
And what years was that, Eileen? I'm thinking back to the decades and how we have changed in our approach to HIV and AIDS. So are you talking about the early 2000s?
Right.
Yeah.
So we did the study from 2001 through 2008. So people presenting to the ER, we would offer them, "Hey, you're here, would you like an HIV test?"
Making not just them safer, perhaps, but the staff and the doctors and
Community.
everyone, the entire
the
community.
Yeah.
So tell us a little about the TV program that you became part of. What was the name of the show? Untold Stories of the ER. How did that go down?
Oh, that was really interesting. So the staff from Untold Stories of the ER would come and interview some of the doctors, and they came out every couple of years, and they would, in the hall as you're working, and they would ask, "Hey, do you got any interesting stories from your past?" And so I had this tiny little baby. She had to be 3 months old, 6 months old. She had presented to an ER I was working in as an intern, and the father was very young, and the complaint was there were worms coming out of her hands and her elbow. And so we took a look at the baby, and he kept saying, "You got to turn the lights down. You got to turn the lights off. They're not going to come out until you turn the lights off." Right. So off the lights went, and we put some blue chucks around the baby, and sure enough, the holes were so small, and the maggots started coming out. And we didn't, I said, "Where's the baby been? Where are you keeping this baby?" And he said, "I'm a single dad. I'm working on the farm." So we admitted the baby. I didn't know this, but there was a fly expert down at Tulane University. So we called her on a Friday night, and she said, "I want them, call in your path department and do some frozen sections where they could put the small maggot down." And then she called me the next day, and she said, "This baby's being kept in a barn." this baby is, those are cow flies, and they're landing on the baby. The baby's probably sucking on her hand. So what's, we got that taken care of, but what's interesting about the whole thing, so Untold Stories of the ER, they accept this as a, possible potential story. And they interview me a couple of times, and then they said, yeah, we're going to air it. We want you to fly up to Canada. And you can be behind the scenes watching. And I said, that would be great. So I get up there, and it's the night before, and he said, we've got some good news and some bad news. The good news is you're playing yourself. The bad news is here's a couple of lines that you need to memorize by tomorrow.
So suddenly you were an actress.
I was an actress, but within 12
And
hours.
how was that? Were you nervous, or was it almost as if you were in the ward on the floor of the hospital?
Acting is hard.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Acting was hard, yeah. They have makeup artists, and they feed you, and they work until it gets done.
Yeah. So do you still have that episode?
I do.
Oh, I'd
Yeah.
love to see it sometime.
Yeah, it's great.
Oh my gosh. What about currently now? Those babies that you were managing while you were in medical school, one of them is working right along beside you now.
Right.
So tell us.
Yeah, so my daughter Mary, her and I are legacies at Cook County Hospital. We're the first female mom and daughter team to finish the program.
Congratulations.
No, isn't that great? That's great.
And what's her experience? I'm sure you've had conversations about you starting off as an intern and going in your residency versus her 30 years later. So how has that been?
It's difficult because they're younger, smarter, faster.
Maybe the path a little easier for your daughter
Path is a
now
little
than for
easier.
you at that time?
Sure, yeah. But it's fun working with her.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of fun being in the same location and being next to her. And I ask some of the other physicians, can you imagine working with your mom? And they all look at me and say, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. No.
Well, she
So
doesn't
fun.
have just any mom.
No.
And speaking, I'm sure you're a wonderful mentor for her as she goes through the steps that you went through. And who were mentors for you?
I think in life, my mom was a big mentor. My husband, Phil. Phil actually mailed my medical school application. So he's been a really strong supporter of the whole, mom with career, mom with children, mom with, whatever you need. So he's just been absolutely great.
Yeah. And what about your mother? Did she have a chance to have education? You said she had how many children?
10.
10. So not just Eileen and Common, but our big families. So what did she encourage? Did she get a chance to see you qualified for medical school?
She did not. She did not. But she was a warrior, How do you raise 10 kids with a single income? I don't know how she did it.
Yes.
I remember her starting dinner at 11 o'clock in the morning, peeling all those potatoes, and getting that meat ready, and the dinner, and the dishes, and the laundry. And
did she have a washing machine? I'm curious.
she did.
She wasn't washing all those clothes by hand.
No.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
she just kept
still.
going. She never really complained,
Yeah. Amazing generation.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, we have so many more mudroom cons and we're not prepared to do the things that they did, but thank God they did what they did for us. So what would your words of wisdom be to your younger self, young girls watching the program who would love to follow in your footsteps, go into an exciting, fulfilling career in medicine?
I say, find a mentor out there. Open your windows, and what I mean by that is really seek out different relationships with people, volunteer, talk to people, get off the phones, right? And really start listening to, people like yourself, who's an attorney, if you want to become an attorney or a physician. Try to get into the emergency department to volunteer. If you like animals, go to the shelters, so you really you want to walk through somebody else's life before you pick.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I would often say to the Moraine Valley students, whatever profession you want to get into, offer yourself for free.
Yes.
And then if you do a bang-up job, they're going to want you on board, regardless of what it costs. So I think that's a great idea to volunteer. And one of my last questions for you, Eileen, as we talked about what you might do next in your life, you said, I am waiting for my next assignment from God. And I love that. So maybe talk a little bit about your faith and how it has informed your life and your profession, and what comes next for you.
Oh, Eileen, it's so loaded. I look at life as there's a miracle happening every day. And I have gotten on paths where the door was shut. And I always thought, oh man, that's a failure. You know, why can't I get a job here? Why can't I get a job there? And then all of a sudden the HIV project was thrown at me.
Yeah.
You know, oh, I really wanted to go there, and all of a sudden I ended up at Cook County Jail. And it was because another door was shut. So what's next? I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but I'm trying to prepare for it. I exercise. I try to, practice faith all the time. I'm very thankful. I think gratitude is an important quality. I love life.
Oh, I love that.
Love
Yes.
life. Yeah.
Gratitude, and just wait and see what doors open, because
Exactly.
doors and miracles are happening every day. That's something we can use. Oh my gosh, that has been wonderful. Thank you so much,
Oh, you're welcome.
Eileen, for all your words of wisdom. Thank you, viewers, for watching, and we will see you next time on Where the Road Rises. Thanks, and bye.